Hi, my name is CJ and this is my RC channel. Let's finally start building some stuff. So, one of the first things that I am probably going to want to do here is tap some of these holes with steel screws, but I'll wait on that. That time will come. Let's start building diffs. Okay. So for front and rear, it's, you know, the Japanese characters here are kind of a pain, but it is what it is, and the print is kind of small, but and there's not a lot of verbiage, which is also unfortunate. So we've got a pair of these. I'm going to get out a shock stand. Even though I'm not building shocks right now, this can be very handy for the diffs when you're building them up, to be able to pop them in one of these little holes and fill it up with fluid and such. So that'll come in handy when I get there. So, okay. So we're gonna start with one out drive, and all the out drives appear to be the same, which is good. And we're gonna need a pin. We're gonna need a is that the 4x4? Wait a second. Oh, the 8x16. That's the big one right there. So we're gonna need one of these, and gonna need one of these big grub screws. Now, I don't think I have any titanium grub screws. Nope. Okay, just checking. And I'm gonna need some Loctite at times, but not here because we're doing the grub screw into plastic. Is that a 2mm? Yes, it is a 2mm. Okay. So I might as well get a few of these out. And let's see, this is the 4x4 grub screw, because there's two sizes of grub screws in here. Interesting. Get a caliper on this. Okay, so that looks like the 4x4 right there, the smaller ones. And we have 3 diffs, so where's the big one go? Okay, there is not a grub screw for that, so those go elsewhere for the moment. Okay, we need O-rings. I'm going to start, it says we need 3 of them in here, but I'm going to start with 2 I'm going to set these up right here. Okay, just slide those over. Okay. So I'm also going to be using the ProTech RC Premium White Gear Grease. This stuff is outstanding. It is supposed to be designed for not only reduced wear but reduced noise, and I found it to work really well. So we're going to start by putting some grease on here. slide those on there. Just want to make sure that grease is all the way through. Now we're going to put an O-ring over the end of that shaft. And I'm just going to gently slide it down. You want to be very gentle with these O-rings. You don't want to damage them in any way, but you want to kind of press it into that recess there. It's going to kind of slide right in because there's a little groove right here in the shaft, and then there's the recess that it goes into. So now we want to line up. Okay, you've got a hole here. That's interesting. Just want to make sure I understand what they're asking me to do there. Okay. You're going to slide that down into the there's a hole through the shaft, and you want to kind of just ease that pin down in here. Now once it's in, it can't completely escape, so even if it moves out of line at the moment, don't worry, it's not going to go anywhere. And now we basically plug the hole with a grub screw. So the grub screw is really just a like an access port. And now we're sealing that access port that it served its purpose. But remember, that's how you're going to get that pin out of there if you need to at some point. So now I can do the same thing with this one. It's going to be interesting to see how they have us fill these diffs up. By what indicator do we know that there's enough fluid in there? For example, on the Serpent GT cars, you have to put the diff on a scale and weigh it, of all things, until you get the right weight. And that lets you know that there's enough fluid in the diff. A lot of them just say fill it 3/4 of the way full, or fill it till it's within 2 millimeters of the top, or something like that. But Serpent wants you to have a precision weight. So again, I'm just sliding that pin into place, and now I'm going to seal the access hole with the grub screw. Okay, now let's take a look while we're here at the other. How are we supposed to do this one? Because I'm only seeing okay. Let's see if we can figure out which is which and how this goes. Okay, so this, okay, so if you look carefully, you will notice that this is different than this. These have these extra holes here and these little extra like shapes and ridges, or whatever, however you want to describe them. So in this one, we're basically doing the same thing, but we're putting the pin in while because it's big enough. We don't need an access port, shall we say. So let's get a pin. Just one, please. Let's get an out drive. Let's get a big bearing. Pop our bearing on, get our O-ring, lock Loctite come into play down the road, undoubtedly. Okay. Ease our O-ring into place. And probably the easiest way to do this is going to be with a needle nose pliers. Just hold the pin gently. You don't want to mar it up in any way. And gently slide it in. So there we go. So now we need to get our gears going. So let's see. 1, 2, 3. And these are just going to drop down onto those pins. I would recommend putting a little bit of grease back here, because these pieces are going to move. I mean, there's going to be a lot of diff fluid that's going to get around here, but putting a little bit on there. And now you just pop that down over that pin. Make sure the pin is centered, and it should drop right in place. There we go. Okay. Might as well just dump those out. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3. 2, 2, and 2. Okay, and then we're going to need our little washers, or these are shims. And it looks like they're telling us just to use 1 per. So again, this is another place that I'm going to want to just put a little dab of grease. They kind of stick together, so make sure that you do just have one. Now, what I'm going to do is do these one at a time. I'm going to start by placing them with the little cutaway facing up, like that. And the next one will go in with the cutaway facing down. There we go. So 2 more of those to do. I'm literally just putting a teeny dab of grease at the edge there, so when I put those aluminum rods in, there's a little bit of lubrication on them. Eventually that diff fluid will pretty much get everywhere, but doesn't hurt to have some lubricant in there right away. Okay. They're not the easiest diffs I've ever put together, but they're not the hardest either. So definitely not the hardest. I'm just kind of tired of differentials. I just rebuilt all 3 diffs on my truck for this weekend's racing, and we got rained out again. Unbelievable. It's like twice in a row. Okay. So let's see, we're gonna need both of these. We're gonna need this guy. We're gonna need our 3 paper gaskets. Be very gentle with these. They are easily torn. And we need our 3 big bearings and our 3 out drives. Oops. Okay, so now I just, we have these 2 big shims here. I'm just looking to see if they don't mention them somewhere on here. Okay, that's in the next section. It's really good to have a selection of like little trays. I'm just using some little parts boxes right now because all my little trays are full of bolts and such. Okay. Remember to make sure that that O-ring is seated. You don't want it to tear. I think I see how they are giving us our fill point. There's a little hand with a finger, a little icon right here, and it's pointing to the top of the star, the shafts there. So I assume that means we are to fill it to the top of that level there. Now that's easier said than done, especially when you're working with thicker fluids. I'll show you what I mean by that. You kind of need to put fluid in, reach down below, rotate the shaft a little bit to turn these 4 gears, let it, work that diff fluid downwards into and among the gears, because there will be a lot of big air bubbles down there, and these diff fluids are very thick. They can be like honey and thicker at times. So depending on what weight you're using, for example, I was rebuilding a diff this weekend with like the heaviest stuff I'm using here is 20,000. I was using 150,000 weight for a center differential for the road race truck. That is some really thick fluid. So we got those done. So let's get screws out. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be swapping these out for the titanium ones. And this is a place where that is going to be very important, because they are going to reduce rotating mass by another bit. So between the aluminum shafts for the gears, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to start by screwing in the and tightening these 4 screws in each of them. And then once they are, sealed and closed, I will pull 1 screw at a time and replace it with the titanium screws. That way the threads will have been tapped, everything will be good to go. So now another thing I need to do is I need to mark one of these 2 diffs here as the rear. And this is something you're going to need to do depending on which how many different fluids you're using. Like you might be using 3 different grades of fluids. You might be using 10 in the center, 7 in the front, and 4 or 5 in the rear. You need to make sure that you know which one of these is the rear, so you don't put the wrong weight of fluid in the rear. Now, What I usually do is I get just a little piece of tape, just some paper masking tape, just tear a little bit and stick it on the side. You know, it's not going to stay on there forever. It's just to mark it while I'm getting set to start assembling stuff. So before we put our gaskets in place, we should start filling things up. So I'm going to do, oh, that's, no, it is right. Let me just put the shock fluid out of the way. Okay, I'm doing 5,000 in the rear, and then I'm going to do 20,000 in the front and the center. So now you can see it looks like it's close to being there, but once I rotate these gears a little bit, sometimes you need to hold the center down just a bit. You'll see that diff fluid disappeared into the crevices in the bottom of the diff. So now we're going to need to add a little more. And this kind of, you have to play a little bit of a waiting game on this. Another thing you can do is like use a wrench to hold it down and then kind of hold it with your finger, and it doesn't want to let me twist it. Come on, there we go. Twist it forward and then twist it back a little bit, and again it'll just, a bunch of that lube just disappears down there. So I'm going to let that, yeah, still got some big gaps there. So put a couple more drops in. And let's just let that settle for a minute. While that's settling in, I'm going to start on one of these. Might as well start on both of them at the same time. Now this stuff is going to be a lot thicker. Now remember what I told you, it looks like I just poured a whole bunch in there, but once you start running these gears around, it disappears. And you can see how thick it is that the gears start floating upwards. It is a real pain to have to stick your finger in that stuff. It's nasty. That one looks pretty good. See, this bigger diff has a lot more places for the lube to go on off to, and or to not get into if you don't give it time. I'm happy with that one. I think this one needs a teeny bit more. Okay. So now we can just do these one at a time. Sorry. And make note that you've got two of one size and one of another. Don't get them all, don't worry about getting them all like tight at the same time. Just get each of them started, because if you've got any problems, you know, like getting the gasket aligned, things like that, you want to find out before you've tightened these things all the way down. And I really should clean off the top of that screw, and likewise this wrench has a little bit of snot on it slash diff lube. It is like Sasquatch's snot. Now, when you get one down, don't tighten it down. You kind of want to work these in a little bit of a star pattern. So, you know, when you get one close to bottom, shift over to another one across from it, because you don't want this thing to be like askew. And there is our nice smooth differential action. Love it. Perfect. So now I'm going to go through the tedious part of doing this to all three of these, and then I'm going to one by one back out these screws and replace them with titanium screws. And you've seen me do one of these. There's nothing more to it. There's no need to watch me do all three. So I'm going to stop the video, and I'll come back when I have them all bolted together and when they've all got the titanium screws in place. Okay, we are on to the gearboxes, or to the differential cases, and they're identical. There's no front or rear, which is nice, and that makes it all easier to do repairs and such, because you know, it all looks the same. Now, we're gonna need these guys. We're gonna need our big grub screws. So the first thing we need to do is take these two pieces here, and we need our axles, or our drive shafts. We need the pinion gears, and we need these 4 bearings. So we're going to take one bearing, put it on the shaft here, slide that through, press that bearing into the plastic, put another bearing on from the opposite side, oops, these all the same size? Yeah, I think it's just tight. Let's see. Now the the other side slides right in. Why doesn't this side slide in as easily? They're both the same size bearings. Let's try this side, see if it's as difficult. Wow. Huh. Yep, that's the way it's supposed to go together, but for some reason these bearings just don't want to press in there. Let's see. Let's try doing it like this. There we go. You really need to push down on that sucker. Okay, here's what I'm doing. I noticed that this was the lowest part. So if you put the bearing on a hard, flat surface, you can get a straight down press on it. And it goes right in. Sure hope I don't have to take that out anytime soon. I imagine once you've taken it out and put it back a few times, it loosens up enough. Okay. So this is where Loctite is going to come in for the first time, because we're doing metal on metal, and these are the kind of grub screws that just love to fall out. So let's see, these look like a 2.5, and they are at least a 2.5. They might even be a 3. Nope, they're not a 3. 2.5 it is. Now remember, you're not gluing it in, so be reasonable with the amount of Loctite that you're going to use. Hold the pinion gear with your finger to make sure that you get a nice tight merging of these pieces here. And remember, the tape is our rear, and the long drive shaft, or however you want to describe it, is in the rear. So if we follow, if we follow the image, our gear goes on this side. Now I can pull this off. And this is where we're going to need these two. That goes against the bearing there. weird. Okay, I've got it on the right side. One would think it would just drop in, but it obviously wants to be difficult. There we go. What the? What on earth? Okay, it looks like we have to cut this piece here out because that is not in the directions. Ah, and they tell it there's a little image here. We're supposed to cut that with a pair of nippers. Okay. Let's get our spacer aligned. Okay. So now notice that these have little runners, and they have them up here, and there's a groove here, here, and there. So you want to make sure that those snap in. Okay, now I haven't put any lube on here, but I'm going to, because the bottom of this is open. I didn't want to do it while I was trying to get everything else together. So I just need to make sure I don't forget about that. So now we need two 3x18s. That is the two of those. I'm going to go ahead and pull out all four of them. Now, that we're not using this yet, so as long as we're doing that, I'm going to get 4 M3x18s. Out of the titanium stock. Okay. And if you'll notice, I did the titanium swap on. Okay, just want to show you a little something. I made a wee bit of a mistake, and I guess I was focusing on other things, and when I was putting this portion together here, I did not notice that there were two different types of outdrives. There are 4 that have a like a little cutaway here, like a bevel, and then there are 2 that do not. The 2 that do not go on your center diff, and you need to make sure you got that correct because there's a slight difference in size in their diameter, And I noticed this when I went to put the shim on and it wouldn't go over the drive. And I took a look at the two of them, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, one of them's different from the other. I made a mistake. So I just had to take them apart, and was partially, fortunately, and swap out the one piece. So now, and I'm actually kind of glad that I did, because when I opened this diff, I found that the fluid was lower than I thought it was. Obviously, I didn't wait long enough or churn the gears enough. I mean, that just shows you how hard it is to fill all the little nooks and crannies in this center diff with all those veins. So now it feels a lot stiffer and a lot more similar to the front diff. There's a lot less of a difference. There's still a little bit of a difference, but not much. So if you notice a difference between the two, a fairly decent amount of difference, you may want to open it back up and see if the fluid hasn't settled in a bit, and that it's lower than you need it to be. So now I need to slide on that little shim and make sure that the shim goes into place. Kind of just, the assembly just snaps in. Now, if you see that the shim is like sticking out to the side here, you kind of just need to joggle it a little bit and it slides in place. So you, in other words, push the out drive forward a little bit, and that lets it move into position. So again, you know, watch out for these little rails. And it's easier if you get the top tucked under the edge first, these upper sections here and here. If you get those onto the rails, it snaps together much more easily. So now I can go ahead and thread these up with the steel screws and then replace them with the titanium. And then we're going to move on to chassis. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.